The events that probably influenced Carol and her siblings most of all in their developing years were a series of 3 tragedies that occurred to the family. The first one was that Margaret and Doris's, or their sister Ginny, was murdered in 1955. Doris was living in Melbourne, or in Victoria, and because of her circumstances, and they had children and they were in poor straits, they couldn't come over to the funeral. But Doris had this desire to come back to her family. So later in 1955, Keith, father, Doris, and the twins and Pauline, they came back to South Australia, leaving their eldest daughter, Catherine, with Keith's parents. They were destitute when they came. They came with just pretty much what they
had nothing.
What they stood in.
To buy mattresses and
You remember that? How old were you?
Oh, I was too small to remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we would have been about 18 months old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How many of them?
well, at that stage there was only Carol, Christine,
Parents and 3 children.
but then Keith he was a bit of a boozer.
Yeah, Keith had an alcohol problem.
He had an
Yeah.
alcohol problem.
Good
let's
enough
face
fellow
it.
without alcohol.
I mean, I could have been 4 years old or something, or around 3 or 4, but I do remember Dad had come home with his mates, and you know, I remember one night this guy doing a handstand on the floor, and all the money fell out of his pocket, rolled everywhere on a wooden floor, and we were out there picking up all of this money. You know, we'd never had money before, and so we just kept it all. But they would always come home drunk, and it was loud, and probably my first introduction to alcohol. You know.
He had a car accident. We were living up there at the same time, weren't we? In a temporary home until we could get a proper house. And he went off with the bloke that lived next door to us. And he was a real drunk, you know.
Mr. Wiedenhofer, the other gentleman's name was, who my father went to a dance with, yeah.
And they went off somewhere and they had a car accident. And he was seriously injured. And he didn't live that long after that accident, did he? But he was never
Well, he
the
was
same.
he was incapacitated as a result of the accident, and this occurred only about 3 years after they came to Mannum.
Yeah.
And so that meant then that he had to go on to some form of pension.
Because Dad had to be sort of watched all the time, watched so he didn't stop breathing. Because he was in the bedroom, he was either in hospital. After that, he was either in the Mannum Hospital or the Adelaide Hospital, or Mount Brecon, or in bed. Where when we were home, we had to watch him.
For 4 years?
Yeah. And until he basically died.
Leaving Doris with then 6 children. And the eldest wasn't very old.
We were forever living with Auntie Margaret, Uncle Bernie, some of the church people, and so we were forever living like that. So my mother received a lot of support, yeah. Yeah, so she was pretty tough too, my mother, in that period of time. I remember before she went to hospital, we were all locked in. Now this is one that's for Chrissy. We were all locked in a room because she had to go to sleep in the afternoons, and my mother had her case ready. This is for you, Chrissy. I'm going to get you back. She always thinks it's funny. I was very weak type of person, and my mum was pretty strict with what you come after with giving you a hiding in those days. And we're all locked in the room, and Chrissy had to go to the toilet. And She did it in the case that my mother had packed to go to hospital with. I'm getting you back, Chrissy. And she always thought it was funny because Mum was hitting us until we owned up for it. And I said, I did it then, I did it. And Chrissy laughs about it to this day. It's true, because I was very weak. I've always been the... I do actually remember that incident, and no, and like Carol said, you know, Mum was tough when she had to be, and you know, no way. I was probably a little bit tougher than Carol.
It is. In fact, it's quite strong not to dobs. You know.
Then I got an extra hiding for it. We were getting a hiding until we owned up for it.
How old were you at this time?
Gee, probably 5, yeah. So, got you, Chrissy.
You laugh or you cry.
We'd been there for hours though, you know.
And what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
But in the case.
Yes, in the case, all packed, ready to go to hospital. Baby's clothes, nappies, nighties, all ready to go to hospital. Yes.
And when Catherine, what stage did Catherine?
No, well then there was the purchase of the home.
Yeah.
Keith got a payout because of his accident, and they were able to buy a little home.
Yeah, they're right. Dad got a small pension and a payout. We lived in a trust home in Elizabeth Street, and then we moved down to William Street. It was our own house. It was just almost like a mud brick inside, because you could see the pine. It had pine logs inside, and where the plaster had come off, you could see through. But he painted it up, and
We had a huge pepper tree in the backyard. And it's quite ironic because that with Mum's funeral, we went for a drive up there, and of course the house has been knocked down now, but they've still got that big old pepper tree in the backyard. And the house is actually for sale, and it would have been good to be able to buy it. But yeah, it was a lot of happy times there.
In that tree?
Yeah, yep.
he didn't live long after we moved there. But we were lucky that we actually had our own home.
And he was well enough to paint it?
Yes, yeah. But on and off visits to the hospital, which from our backyard you could see the hospital. And from time to time, and I do remember this, us kids would get in the backyard and would see Dad up on, those slat bench seats. He'd be sitting in the gardens looking down at our house. Couldn't see us, but we could look up all that way up and we would see Dad under the trees. I remember that to this day, yeah.
What colour was it?
The little house had we had lots of fun there. It had a large veranda. We had a wonderful neighbour, and we had a man the other side, and an elderly lady that we used to do some awful things to. Just imagine all 6 of us.
We were terrible. We were mischief.
Sorry?
We were terrible. We were full of mischief, because...
As kids are, if you let them run riot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess Mum did the best she could, but, with 6 of us, we were all out all over Mannum doing all sorts of things, so getting caught for quite a few of them as well.
As you do.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'd be pinching watermelons up the top, and we'd be gotten all sorts of trouble. Everybody knew the McLean children. Yes, used to get up to all sorts. And you don't realise it until you all get together as adults and reminisce about all those things. Oh yes, the police knew who we were. 6 lively children.
Yeah. Did you roam very far?
Yes, quite often we used to run away. And you have all the police looking for you all night and see how long we could stay out. So
Where would you stay?
in a big tower, big water tower.
The same one every time? Or?
Yeah.
The police never worked that out?
No.
you know, I think there's not, apart from our older sister Kathy, there wasn't one of us that wasn't attracting some sort of attention over time from the police. Chrissy, you know, shot a lady in the arm with an air rifle, our next door neighbour.
That was from that same pepper tree, because we had a tree hut up there, and as I look back now, my friend was Mickey Doherty, and she was quite a lot bigger than me, but you know, I used to hang around with her, and she had a slug gun. So we were up in the pepper tree, and you know, just having a little shot at things, and then the path that led between the two houses, Granny Leaders was her name, and she'd come along, and I actually took a shot, and I actually hit her in the arm, shot her in the arm. It's just terrible. When I think about it now, you know, but that was the tomboy in the pepper tree.
So the air rifle came from a friend up the back, and they lined her up and shot this 80-year-old woman in the arm with an air rifle. Do you know, Pauline was out with boys having car accidents and things like that. And, you know, there was no control of us children. We walked about 15 kilometres out to an old church and broke in there and stole a whole lot of maps one time with Chrissy. If I've got Chrissy wrong, it could be Pauline, but...
It was your Pauline.
That was me.
But that was my young brother Eddie and I. We went out all the way back, and we got all the way back into Mannum. We found some bottles, cashed them in, and the shopkeeper come out and said, "Where did you get those maps?" And we said, "Oh, we got into an old school out the back." Turns out he owned the school. So he called the police, and the police are knocking on the door. So Eddie and I used to go down the street and steal milk money and milk. So, you know, we were all, as Carol said, we all were very active.
They were lucky though, because my dad had a very good name in the town, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Dad was a real joker, and he loved all the kids. I don't think a kid went without an ice cream and he never had much money, but he used to save all the threepences and sixpences, you know.
We felt like it was really, we were really shattered when really a terrible man come along and sold that house.
This man Mum met through, you know, writing letters, I don't know, pen pals or something.
Mum joined a Lonely Hearts Club, you know, where you write to people and stuff like that. And this big man turned up one day and basically came to check us out. He happened to be the father of the one who Mum started seeing.
Within no time, the house was sold. We were thrown, I remember the night, thrown in the back of an old buckboard with a canvas top, on a mattress, all of our possessions up to Blanchetown. And that was the change. For poor Doris, our mother, that was one of the major blows. You know, that was the unravelling of her children. To be, you know, with this guy and move off to Blanchetown, where, you know, the hitting and the beating and all of that started.
Really?
And so the kids then came out in frying pan into the fire.
I don't know how much you want me to put to this or not, or just I remember getting to Blanchetown the first night, the absolute first night, all of our clothes, once we'd been, this old house, massive old house, and then in the middle of the night, all of our clothes went out in the street, and this guy's screaming and chasing and hitting Mum and hitting us. I slept rough, Eddie and I, out in the bushes. I don't know where the girls went, but they went up, there was a big shed, a vehicle shed, because...
Where did you sleep?
Sorry?
In the shed, or...?
In the shed. That was terrible times, and that was the start of more problems for Mum. And
Eddie and I slept under a bush on the first night. It was hell, and I've done a lot of things in my time, but I still don't remember ever being as frightened as I was then.
We weren't old enough to understand exactly what was happening, but Laurie came along and we just was loaded into the what you called a backboard then and taken to Blanchetown, and we never saw the house again.
Yeah. Mm.
Mum would go missing for days on end, and she'd come back with both eyes closed, mouth swollen, and it was just horrendous. And we were just trapped. We didn't know what to do. And
You were how old at this time?
I was 9 or 10, and obviously not big enough to look after Mum, but the police would come every now and again. But it's a small town syndrome, and they knew what he was like, and it was just, you know, it'll be all right, you know. So it was sort of condoned, accepted around the town that that's how he was, and that was what was going to happen. Yeah.
You know, Laurie was he was known as the town drunk, and so they certainly all knew who he was, yeah. And then everybody soon knew who we were too. Yeah. But there were some good times. They used to have dances, and they used to, after them, they used to have bonfires, you know, so it was good times up there as well. Yeah. So there you go.
But probably, and you said before, you know, country towns not all fun, of course.
No,
and of course, one of the things is that, of course, everyone talks,
Yes, exactly.
which would have been.
Oh, very hard. Very hard for us, because I think that's why we were suppressed for a long time, because we always felt like we weren't worthy, or we were poor and we didn't have what everybody else had, and that we felt that people looked down at us.
I think they did, because, I mean, you know, that all came from Laurie and his father and that, and what sort of people were we living in that circumstance, you know. Mum and probably all of us took a lot of flack from that, you know. You know, after Dad died, we were so poor, and you know, we might have had a piece of cardboard in your shoe or hole in your cardigan or stuff like that, and you didn't realise at the time because you're that age, but they used to call us, I can laugh about it now, the dirty McLeans.
Well, I don't actually remember calling them the dirty McLeans, but I remember how we used to play chasey at school, you know, and you weren't it or you weren't caught. You had McLean bugs, you know, someone would run up and smack you on the shoulder. McLean bugs, you know, and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's like very disgusting looking back on it now.
People generally, we were the dirty McLeans. And I do remember going to primary school there at Blanchetown, and I had no underwear. I never used to wear underwear because we didn't have underwear. But one day my pants got so paper thin, they're just some shorts, my bum was hanging out. The teacher come up and rang Mum and said, look, there's a big hole in Tony's pants and we can see his bum. And so, yeah, we were looked down upon. And I remember having cardboard in my shoes because, you know, in the winter the water had a hole like that and the water would get in. And I don't remember how, you know, like we'd wear the same clothes all week, but maybe they got a wash and then we'd wear them on the weekend. I'd go out shooting rabbits, gutting rabbits before school. I don't remember showering because the facilities weren't that good. So Carol says, yeah, we were looked down, you know, people looked down.
At the McLean children, it's true. That's how we felt in both the country towns. Yeah, and yet, why would you feel like that? I look at somebody now, and the first thing that I want to do for them is to help them, you know, to be who they want to be. But I think it's because of that experience. That's what I feel, definitely.
We shifted to Blanchetown for this supposedly well-respected man who turned out to be the town drunk.
Not so well respected.
No, so.
And so they were very wealthy until Laurie drank the money away, and then they found another cash cow, which was the McLeans. And so Mum had the pension, house, sold that, and that propped them up for some years.
Catherine, a few years later, was killed in a car accident.
She was their oldest child,
She was actually only 11 months older than Chrissy and I. Yes, matter of fact, on the 20th of August, we were all the same age. Because Chrissy and I turned, for example, we've turned 60 on the 7th of August this year, and Kathy was still here, she still would have been 60 until the 27th. So it was the one time we could say they were all the same age, and that actually changed all our lives really, because even though she was 11 months older, she was so much older in herself and really
anchor.
absolutely, and protected us. And she actually was going out that night, and we were actually living at Blanchetown, as a matter of fact, because the house had gone, and living in very sad circumstances, as a matter of fact. The man that, you know, really ruined my mother's life, we were actually living with his parents, and up in Blanchetown in those days, you've got, I suppose you've got Department of Planning and Transport and Infrastructure today. Those days it was called the highways. And there were some lads up there, and we were all teenagers. I was 14, she was 15, and I was going out with a boy up there as well, and she was meeting a boy at Purnong. So we were on the Blanchetown to Swan Reach Road, and the car rolled over 5 times. And matter of fact, there was, she was the only one thrown out of the car.
I gather from this, but I'm not quite clear, was Carol and maybe Chrissy in the car with her at the time?
Carol was in the car, and I think, and Carol, she hasn't smoothed over it, but this has had a massive impact on Carol. Kathy was in the front, in the middle, between 2 boys, and Carol was in the back with her partner, her boyfriend at the time, boyfriend. Got into the gravel, travelling too fast, and I think this fellow was told to slow down, and he didn't, and it got in, and the car got into a slide, and it hit an embankment, and I think the doors were flung open, and Kathy went out. Now, you know, Carol was with the boy in the back, and he had the sense to put his hand on the roof, grab Carol and kick his knees into the seat, and they stayed in the car, and they were relatively, you know, like, they weren't injured. But Kathy went out on the road and fractured her skull. This was massive on Carol, you know, all of us, but, you know, this was hard on Carol, being there and seeing this happen to our leader. Kathy was our leader, and it was just, even though they were all the same age virtually, but Kathy was just such a leader, calm, collected, always made the right calls and looked after us. So I think, yeah, this was devastating for Carol.
And of course we all went, it was a Friday night, so we all walked into Swan Reach, and we were picked up, with luck would have it in those days, people coming from Adelaide, whether it be school or work, were coming from the bus, and so somebody picked us up and took us into Swan Reach, and of course they called an ambulance and everything, but yeah, so it was quite sad.
Totally life-changing thing for Carol and for Mum, of course. Totally at that age, it's something you don't forget.
Yeah, by the time we came back, well, I never got to go back. I had to wait at Swan Reach, and in the meantime, for my mother to come down and get me. And in the meantime, my sister had been taken to Waikerie, then from Waikerie to the Queen Leah's, and of course, really and truly, I think they kept her on life support because they had another girl who was waiting for a kidney downstairs, and we were so poor that we really didn't have anyone to take us immediately down there, which was quite sad. And yeah, so that was on the 17th of June, and she was taken off life support on the 19th. But that changed the whole way of our lives, really, totally, because then we felt we had nobody to protect us anymore.
You know, there's only 11 months between us and Kathy, but obviously she was more mature than us and understood that things were not right, and we couldn't live that way, and she ended up having an instant dislike of Laurie and vice versa, so.
He said, "I wish you were dead," to my sister, as a matter of fact, as we left.
He did say that they had quite an argument because they had as I said, an instant dislike, but he knew that Kathy was stronger than him, stronger mentally, and I don't think he could quite handle that. So unfortunately, she did die, and of course he was never forgiven for that, a lot of things, but mainly for that as well.
I always remember that. Always remember it, because she used to stand up to him. And that's exactly what he said that night, yeah, as we were standing out there. Because the house was across the Blanchetown pubs there, and the house was directly across a deli there, and then we were there, 4-square shop. But
they, you know, from the condition of the house and the contents of the house, it was very wealthy furniture that we had never seen or anything like that, and an extremely large house with another house down below and that. And he did actually basically drink it away, and Pop, his father, he was basically 72 when we went to live there.
So he was still around, obviously. He was the big guy who had come to check you out.
Yeah.
So he was still around for how long?
Quite a while. His wife was alive, and we never realised then, but we had to look after her, and she used to hit us, and we realised years later that she actually had dementia, and that he was actually doing things to her that he shouldn't do, you know, at that age.
At the time you just thought it was just this mad, vicious old woman who kept hitting you. And you had to look after her.
Yeah, we had to look after her, but then in the night time you'd hear, and then you never sort of put it together until later on that even in her condition he was doing bad stuff to her, and you understood later.
And that was quite stressful, looking after a lady that had dementia, and basically they used to tie her up, which was quite sad, and yeah, so that was quite frightening.
You know, when you're young, you know something's not right, but I think there was some other abuse going on in the house because she had dementia and she didn't really, she couldn't protect herself. So, but the girls, they were great, they helped, but this lady was difficult and nasty, and so I always felt really sorry for the girls that they didn't get their education that everybody deserves. And so when I have a look at Carol now, and I just, for someone who was forced out of high school, you know, early, she's just an amazing woman.
So one by one, and I was the first, came down to Adelaide. So yeah.
Possibly dislocated, I guess is how you felt.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I had to come to Adelaide. To the people at the service station said they knew somebody at St Kilda where I could stay. So I went there and then went searching for a job immediately. Got my first job in a cannery. Doesn't even exist anymore, off of Grand Junction Road. Anglus's doesn't even exist.
All of the girls probably had an incentive to get out of that house.
Oh yes.
When this guy came along.
This is where we lost some touch with the family. It felt like you were on the other side of the earth at Blanchetown from going to Mannum for some reason. I don't know. When you look now, it's not that far at all.
And as Carol said, he had us perfectly isolated. So Yeah, I was really worried when all of a sudden the girls left. They went off to Adelaide, and I don't know whether it happened together, but all of a sudden it was me and my brother Eddie with Laurie and Mum, and I was terrified that my sisters, that, you know, they used to give Eddie and I $2 here and there. That's a lot of money in those days because they were getting a little bit of money. That was, yeah, I was terrified when Carol and Chrissy left.
Then they went up to Berry after Blanchetown.
Yes, yeah.
We moved, we went to so many schools, Truro, Cockatoo Valley, Millbrook, back to Mannum, back to Blanchetown. Just so many schools that Eddie and I went to, so it was move away from Blanchetown, come back, down to Somerton Park for a while. So, you know, that happened while we were in primary school. I got held back 2 years in primary school. I mean, can you imagine that? How that puts one behind in life? Just by, I'd get to a school and they realised that I hadn't been to school since September of the previous, no, you've got to repeat that year. So with the girls gone, everything was out of control. So I stayed with Mum until I was 14 or 15, and I was started to knock Laurie around. Eddie and I'd have a plan and want to distract him. I'd go up and whack him, hit him with a broom or anything, and I hit him with a stick one night, and that was about the end of it. I picked up because he was bashing Mum, and I picked up a big piece of wood and I hit him, and I think he had like 9 stitches. The ambulance came, and I really had a limited future in that house after that because I just got too big for him to handle.
A terrible thing for kids that age to be actually forced to do. But us girls by then had moved to Adelaide because we couldn't live there anymore. If you don't think of years later, you've left your little brothers behind, but it's just...
I gather it was just impossible to stay. But certainly a tough, impossible situation where a young fellow like that has to bash a bloke on the head with a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Has to.
Yeah, forced to, yeah.
The police had come and they'd lock this guy up and he'd go to Cadell for, 6 months, 3 months and things like that, but which gave Mum and Eddie a bit of respite from it all.
Of course, I met the father of my 2 children and married him. And married him, his mother, in those days, 1969, she was fearful that he was 21 and I was just turned 16, and she was fearful that the laws in those days were, they called it carnal knowledge.
It was a bit illegal, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that was how I remember it. And so we married in the registry office and had a small reception in Sid and Stuart Howson's house, which he was a founder of the football club, one of the founders. Yeah, in their house around in Severn Avenue, and that's where they lived because, yeah, Sid was one of the founders, and so there I was, married. Matter of fact, I had to go to Blanchetown and get my mother to sign to say that I could.
One night, a car pulled up out the front of the big house, and it was Carol and her boyfriend, who was Ray, and they'd come up to get permission because they were so young. They had to get permission to get married, and that was Carol, and then later on, Chrissy. So and it's just a process. Then it happened to Pauline. They just all got so young and had babies at young ages.
You've had no guidance in growing up to become a woman, so you've not sort of up to all that, and I had to get married. Had to in those days, so. But Carol, Carol's married at 16, that's way too young, way too young. So that's just what happened. Pauline, I think Pauline's actually got the oldest grandchild, and she's the youngest of us girls. So it's just a lack of guidance
So, but it was just, yeah, they'd gone, and then a short while later they were back with a boyfriend and they were going to get married, and so young, too young.
It had probably been a while since you'd been back too.
Yes, yeah.
Was that maybe your first trip back?
Yes.
Oh, Mum, I'm getting married.
Yeah.
What did she say?
Are you pregnant?
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not, Mum, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
That's what she would have said though.
Yeah. Very young and naive, because Sue Powson was a lovely person. Was fearful that, you know, this legally this is not how it should be.
16 is very young.
Absolutely.
Everyone's young at 16.
You've really lost your youth. Yeah.
I was always worried about Carol and Chrissy, and not because of the men that they married, but it just seemed that they were old men. I was young, of course. Both these guys were drinkers, and it just seemed to me that I really was worried about the girls being so young, being married to these older guys.
After all that I had seen, I actually married a drinker, not realising that, because, you know, you go out and go to a party and this and that, and then, like I said, I had to get married, and then as soon as we were married, I realised that he was actually an alcoholic as well. So that lasted about 2 years, but so you don't, it's not that you don't learn, it's just maybe a pattern. So thankfully I got out of that.
I don't know how many of them then were with Roy, but Pauline was with Roy.
Yes, she was for a long time.
Because he was sending her to good school and everything, and he was trying to get her to have a good education. And what did she do? She wanted
well, remember, you're on film.
Oh. Yeah, well, she wanted to go home, didn't she?
Yeah, she went to Uncle Roy's, but it was a little bit strict there for Pauline at that particular time. So
she went back
for
home.
The holidays.
She went home when she was 16. She went home to Blanchetown, and that's what makes me think the other girls had gone by the Blanchetown experience, or during the Blanchetown experience, because Pauline had gone to live with Roy, and at 16 she went home and decided that she would stay at Blanchetown, and she didn't go back.
She went there for the holidays.
Yes, and didn't go back. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, Uncle Roy, I was already living in Adelaide, and so my mother went to China Ponds and was taken in by Uncle Roy, who's recently just passed away. And yeah, they were very, very generous.
So your mother went there?
Yes, my mother with the children. At one time when she left the man who was abusing her.
Yeah, I remember our Uncle Roy, World War II veteran, but very, you know, a lot of things had happened to him in the war. He never spoke about them, but you could tell he was injured, you know, mentally, and he internalised. But he come and I lived a part of last half of 1969 at the Roadhouse in China Ponds, and the house was across the road, and so I lived there. Then he went to Blanchetown and got Mum and Eddie, and just across from the hotel in China Ponds, the Rising Sun. He found us a little cottage, and Pauline, Eddie and I went there. We spent 1970 there, and it was just bliss. Things were normal. We'd shop, we had things. We went to school, we had friends, and great support from Uncle Roy and Auntie Dot around the corner. Every Sunday night they had this sort of an out bathroom, and the main Adelaide to Mannum Road was go right past this bathhouse, and I reckon a dozen of us kids would go through that bath. But you can see big cracks in the wall, and you're having a bath, you can just see these vehicles going by. But it was great because it was a family thing, and we were having a bath at last.
But she'd always go back, yeah. So
It's incredible how women do.
I know, isn't it? Isn't it just, yeah.
And I'm sure there's plenty of theories been written as to why that
Yes.
happens.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, maybe people just need a, you know, they hang on to their sense of place or something.
Yes, yes.
But I guess, like you were talking about, you didn't have a sense of place, but then of course you got married. Did you feel like you had a sense of place? I guess you were setting up home and stuff as well.
Well, actually, I felt secure,
Hmm.
and I really, I believe that's why I married so young.
Hmm.
I think you're looking for a secure father type figure, and that's how you thought that it had to be. Mm.